Reviewing Terminator Dark Fate. This goes hand in hand with my commentary about James Cameron and why he thinks is flopped at the box office. Now, I'm not going to talk about box office flop in this review. I'll talk about it in the James Cameron video. Link to that down below if you want to see that one. So what did I think of this? Spoilers ahead, a lot of spoilers ahead if you haven't seen it. Terminator 1 and 2 set the storyline. They set the law. And the law is the machines take over and they are saved. Humanity is saved by John Connor, who has skills and knowledge on how to beat the machines and smash them and defeat them and get around their defenses. And that enables to bring humans back. All that skill and knowledge is taught to him by his mother, Sarah. Okay, so that's the law. And of course, at the end of T1, they destroy the chips which were used to create Skynet in the first place. So no Judgment Day. That's it. Story is done. We don't need anything else. So what do we have in this movie? We have a retcon of that by killing John Connor immediately after they stop Skynet. The logic being that Skynet had sent back lots of Terminators to various timelines, and this one happened to find John. That's just how it goes. The fact that Skynet didn't exist, well, that had already happened, so blah, blah, blah. You know, let's not ask that too much. So we kill John Connor. Now, that's fine. You know, subvert my expectations. I don't like it, but if you can weave a good story legitimizing it, like George Martin does in Game of Thrones when he kills off a main character, and I'll talk about that later in the other video. Now, in this case, though, all they've done is retcon T1 and T2. They killed off John, basically made that whole struggle pointless. Sarah's struggle, pointless. Kyle's struggle, pointless. And John's struggle, totally pointless. And they've replaced him with a female, Danny, on the left, and Grace in the middle, as the soldier from the future coming to save Danny from the robot being sent back to kill Danny. Oh, that sounds exactly like what we just had, except now it's females doing it. Yep, that's exactly what we've got. So if you've seen T1 and T2, you've seen Dark Fate, you've seen the plot line, you've seen the story. This would be like, you know, I can't make a proper movie from those, but I need to make the same movie and avoid copyright infringement. That's what this is like. That's exactly what this is like. I'm making it just different enough to avoid copyright infringement, but it's essentially the same thing. Okay, so as far as plot and story goes, nothing's changed. The only difference is how's it all going to transpire. Action-wise, look, I think some of the action is quite decent. Some of it is not quite believable. That's fine, but it looks okay, and I can forgive dodgy CGI because you just have to these days. I know people can bitch and moan about the CGI, but look, let's just forgive dodgy CGI, because if we're going to whinge about CGI, then we're whinging about the story itself to begin with. So the fact that we've immediately suspended our belief in reality to accept that there's time-traveling Terminators that can be operating liquid metal, and the fact that we can do that, but then bitch about CGI. Don't worry about the CGI. Just take it as whatever and then go along for the ride. But be annoyed about things like Sarah having a bitch that being a woman means you're just a womb for some man. And like when that happened, my eyes, I just rolled my eyes. I shook my head and I just rolled my eyes like, fuck, Jesus Christ. Like, the writers don't need to put that shit in. She just sounds like a bitter feminist at that point. A man-hating feminist. That's what she sounds like. And yet then here we have her scene later that she's all emotional, that she's starting to forget what John looks like because she doesn't have any photos of him. She's starting to forget the look of his face. And I thought, well, that was a nice, honest sort of thing. But that's not the same woman that bitched about just a worm for some man. So That's a negative draw in the movie. Being nitpicky, the Terminator, not believable as a threat in the human form. I just didn't buy it. I just didn't have any bad vibes about him. Danny as the savior, not believable. Can't hardly handle a gun, and she's certainly not physical. She's got no physicality, and yet you see her take out 2 people at the end of the movie to save Grace when Grace was a child. And that just kind of wasn't... look, that just it didn't do it for me. I know the idea is show don't tell, such as we didn't see John Connor teaching people how to take out the machines, but Kyle told us. In this case, we see her, but she doesn't teach people anything. She just tells them, like, she's a motivator. We need to band together. And they're all like, oh, yeah, no one else has thought of doing that. Like, oh, fuck's sake. So, in terms of enjoyability, it's watchable. The action's decent. I wouldn't bother watching it again. I've already seen the story in T1 and T2, and that was finished, complete, and whatever. All the others, Terminator Salvation, T3, Genesis, all that, like, they're just junk movies. They're like fanfic following T1 and T2. And this is like bad reboot, trying to avoid copyright infringement. That's what this is. That's my opinion of this movie. I've got more to say in the thing about James Cameron, why he thinks this flopped. So, should you go and see this movie? If you've seen T1 and T2, don't bother. If you haven't, maybe you'll get a kick out of watching it. Otherwise, if you're not going to get too upset now that you know John Connor dies, if that's not going to upset you too much, maybe you're just a little bit curious, yeah, give it a watch. Otherwise, I'd say, no, go watch something else.